There is a rock formation beneath the surface of northern Canada that has endured as the geological foundation of North American industry for 1.8 billion years. It's called the Canadian Shield. Through the fur trade, through the railroad wars, through 2 world wars, through NAFTA, CUSMA, and every treaty signed between Washington and Ottawa in the modern era, that rock sat there, quietly, holding inside it the 6 minerals that the entire electric vehicle revolution requires to function: copper, lithium, graphite, cobalt, nickel, rare earths, the 6 elements that go into every EV battery, every American EV battery, every Tesla, every Ford F-150 Lightning, every GM electric vehicle sold in the United States. And as of February 2026, Canada formally told Washington, "You're not getting preferential access anymore. Not at these terms. Not under these conditions." Before the morning briefings, before the market opened on the East Coast, before the State Department press secretary even logged in, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister walked up to the microphone and said 7 devastating words: "We will not rush into a single sector deal." It's called the U.S. Critical Minerals Preferential Trade Bloc. 54 nations, 3 billion people. The architecture meant to replace China's supply chain dominance, the cornerstone of America's electric vehicle future. And Canada, America's largest source of the 6 minerals that power that future, is not on that list. This isn't a trade dispute. This is a divorce. The minerals partnership that powered the post-war industrial economy. Over, finished, redirected, not by China, not by Russia, by the country that shares 8,191 kilometers of border with the United States, the country that called itself America's closest ally, the country Trump spent a year threatening to make into a 51st state. They heard that, and they made other plans. In the next 17 minutes, I'm going to show you the government document that proves Canada has been stockpiling these minerals as a national security asset, away from American access. The phone call where Trump told the leader of 40 million people that his country was essentially a farm. How Mark Carney built a $270 billion global minerals alliance from scratch, while Trump was posting on Truth Social. And why the EV you're considering buying just got $10,000 more expensive, permanently. You are watching the North American supply chain get dismantled in real time, not by an adversary, by a neighbor who got tired of being threatened. Don't look away. 14 months ago, Donald Trump picked up the phone and called Canada. It was supposed to be diplomatic outreach after a chaotic transition period, a chance to reset the relationship. It became something else entirely. According to multiple sources with direct knowledge of the call, including reporting from CBC, Radio Canada, and the New York Times, Trump raised the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States during that conversation. Let that sit for a moment. He wasn't making a joke. He had already said it publicly. He had already posted it. He had already told the press he would use economic force to make it happen. And now he was saying it directly to the man elected to lead Canada, Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of Canada, former governor of the Bank of England, the most credentialed central banker in the Western world. Trump was on the phone with a man who steadied the global financial system during the 2008 crisis, who managed the Bank of England through Brexit chaos, and he told him essentially that his country should dissolve itself into the United States. Demand 1, restructure the trade relationship on American terms. He wanted Canada to abandon its retaliatory tariff posture, accept Washington's framing that the United States was subsidizing Canada to the tune of $200 billion a year, a claim fact-checkers at CNN found to be false, and renegotiate USMCA from a position of submission. He was telling the leader of 40 million people, the 10th largest economy on Earth, a G7 nation with nuclear allies, to come to the table with its hat in its hand. He wasn't offering partnership. He wasn't offering mutual benefit. He was demanding capitulation dressed up as negotiation. Demand 2, stop the retaliatory tariffs immediately. Canada had, by this point, imposed 25% counter tariffs on over $20 billion in American goods. Justified, legal, proportional. Exactly what any sovereign nation does when another sovereign nation launches a trade war against it without cause. Trump wanted them gone, unilaterally, without any American concessions in return. He was asking Canada to disarm while he kept his weapons pointed. Demand 3, the breaking point. Canada is essentially our 51st state. You rely on our military, you rely on our market. Without us, you don't exist. Carney confirmed this framing publicly in a press conference afterward, saying that Trump had indeed raised the 51st state idea, and that he had told him directly, Canada is not for sale. A long, measured Arctic silence, the kind that doesn't mean confusion. It means calculation. And then Carney made his position clear in 5 words that echoed through every intelligence briefing in every Allied capital. Canada will never be American. He hung up. The call was supposed to last an hour. It lasted less than 40 minutes. Within 90 minutes, emergency call to the Privy Council, Deputy PM Foreign Affairs, Finance. Within 4 hours, Carney was on the line with the Australian Prime Minister. That call lasted 57 minutes. Within 6 weeks, Canada invoked the Defense Production Act, a wartime instrument not used like this since the Korean War, to designate 6 critical minerals as national security stockpile priorities, shielding them from preferential American access. Within 9 months, Canada signed a landmark critical minerals cooperation deal with Australia. Within 11 months, Canada launched the Critical Minerals Production Alliance under its G7 presidency. Within 12 months, Canada reset trade relations with China, cut a deal that slashed canola tariffs and opened the Canadian market to Chinese EVs. By February 2026, Canada formally declined to join the U.S. critical minerals preferential bloc. Trump threatened annexation, called a G7 democracy his cherished 51st state. Carney hung up and built a global supply chain architecture that cuts America out of preferred access to the minerals its electric vehicle industry needs to survive. That is what happens when you confuse patience for weakness. We do evidence here, not opinion, not vibes. Evidence, documents, data, numbers. Receipt 1, the government document. Canadian Critical Minerals Strategy. Defense Production Act Stockpile Designation 2025. Confirmed by CBC News, confirmed by the Energy Mix, confirmed by the Canadian government's own press release. Canada has officially designated 6 critical minerals as national security priorities under the Defense Production Act: copper, lithium, graphite, cobalt, nickel, rare earths. These are not just mining assets, they are now classified alongside military equipment, wartime infrastructure, strategic reserves. What did this mean in practice? It meant that Canada began building strategic stockpiles of these minerals, the same way nations stockpile oil reserves, ammunition, grain, the same way China has been doing for a decade while Washington was distracted by culture wars. And here's what the RBC analysis confirmed. Canada could account for 14% of the global supply of these 6 critical minerals by 2040. 14% of the 6 minerals that every EV battery on Earth requires. And an independent analyst's assessment, classified tier by the investment banking community, read as follows. Canada's reclassification of critical mineral exports as strategic national assets represents the single most significant supply chain disruption risk to the U.S. EV sector since China's 2023 rare earth restrictions. They compared the risk profile of American EV manufacturing supply chain dependency to a developing nation too unstable for long-term infrastructure investment. That's not an insult. That's a spreadsheet. That's math. Receipt 2, the strategic preparation. 3 months before the phone call, before the public disputes, before the tariff wars escalated, Mark Carney was already building the architecture. Under Canada's G7 presidency in late 2025, Ottawa quietly launched the Critical Minerals Production Alliance, a multi-nation framework for when the American partnership became too unreliable to anchor. Obtained through government releases and confirmed by multiple sources. This is the framework. Tier 1, diversification, broaden trade partners for mineral exports. Tier 2, insulation, build domestic processing capacity so Canada doesn't export raw ore, it exports finished battery-grade materials. Tier 3, realignment. This is where we are right now. On November 1st, 2025, Canada and Australia signed a landmark critical minerals cooperation agreement. The 2 nations, which together hold some of the largest deposits of EV battery materials on Earth, formalized a supply chain partnership that explicitly routes around the volatility of American trade policy. On January 16, 2026, Carney signed a deal with China. Let me say that again. The Prime Minister of Canada, America's closest ally, Five Eyes partner, NATO member, signed a trade reset with Beijing. Chinese EVs now enter Canada at 6.1% tariff. In exchange, China cut canola tariffs from 84% to 15%. Do you understand what that means? It means that China, the country Trump has been fighting a tariff war with for 2 years, now has preferential market access in Canada that American manufacturers lost because Trump wanted to play 51st state games. And this week, February 2026, Carney announced he is brokering a bridge between the European Union's 27 member states and the 12-nation CPTPP Pacific Trade Bloc. If that link formalizes, it would become the largest trading bloc in human history, and America is not in it. Canada isn't hedging. Canada is divorcing. Most significant realignment since Canada joined the EEC trade architecture in 1973. Carney didn't steal America's supply chain partners. He built a lifeboat and waited patiently for Trump to sink the ship. Receipt 3, the market verdict. Money doesn't lie. Politicians lie. Analysts spin. Markets don't. Let's listen to the market. On the American EV side, by Q3 2025, EV supply chain investment in the United States was down 30% year over year. Not a dip, 30%. Ford Motor Company took a $19.5 billion charge on its EV investments in December 2025. They announced the cancellation of the all-electric F-150 Lightning, one of the most hyped American EV products in history, gone. Stellantis posted a $22 billion loss for 2025, its first loss since the company's formation, driven largely by EV write-downs and tariff disruption. Globally, EV producers have now registered $65 billion in write-offs since Trump rolled back the $7,500 federal EV tax credit. EV sales are now projected to fall 30% by 2027 and 40% by 2030 compared to prior projections. Gold spiked, capital fled, the bond market signaled distress. The American EV sector didn't stumble, it bled out on the table. On the Canadian side, Canada's stock market index rallied while the American market was convulsing. Capital was flowing north. Carney's $2.3 billion EV incentive strategy, announced February 5, 2026, paired with $3 billion Canadian dollars in plant investment incentives and corporate tax cuts for zero-emission vehicle manufacturers, sent a clear signal to global capital. You can build here. Rules won't change because a leader had a bad morning. The market heard it. The market believed it. The market moved money. Receipt 4, the antagonist meltdown. Within hours of Canada declining to join the U.S. critical minerals bloc, the posts began. Post 1, a reference to how much the United States has given Canada over the decades. Post 2, a personal dismissal of Carney as a globalist central banker with no mandate from the American people. Post 3, a threat to review the Five Eyes intelligence sharing arrangement if Canada continued its pivot toward China. Post 4, Canada has chosen Beijing over Washington. Fine, see how that works out. Post 5, we don't need them. We have our own minerals. We have our own everything. All caps, all fury, zero strategy. He threatened Five Eyes intelligence, the most sacred intelligence architecture in the Western world. The partnership that has, for 80 years, allowed the United States to know what happens in places Americans can't reach because a prime minister declined a trade bloc invitation. That post was read in MI6, GCHQ, ASIS, CSIS, every intelligence chief in the Western Alliance. Every one of them asked the same question, are we next? He didn't just threaten Canada. He threatened the nervous system of Western security. He put every ally on notice. The price of disagreeing with Washington is the safety of your citizens. And every ally is asking the same question. If this is the price of American friendship, can we afford it? Here's why Trump cannot stop this, why the bleeding won't stop, why every action he takes makes it worse. His psychology is built for the wrong century. Trump's model, the dominance hierarchy. He is the alpha. Everyone submits. If they don't submit, they are threatened. If they resist the threat, they are punished. If they absorb the punishment and still don't comply, that is incomprehensible to him. That breaks the model. This psychology works in certain contexts. It works in boardrooms you own. It works in reality television where conflict is the product. It does not work in global capital allocation. Capital is not a person. You cannot bully a balance sheet. You cannot tweet at a supply chain. Capital is water. It flows towards safety, away from heat, away from uncertainty, away from political risk. The United States under Trump is generating so much thermal instability in global markets that capital is evaporating. EV investment down 30%. Clean energy projects canceled. $65 billion in write-offs. $35 billion in clean energy investment that simply walked out of America in 2025 and didn't come back. Canada didn't leave because of weakness. Canada left because it is rational. Carney's team ran the numbers. The probability of supply chain disruption under continued American dependency was too high to price. It became actuarial. They are not making an emotional decision. They are making a risk-adjusted investment decision. Trump is being quantified, measured, found too expensive. The doom loop. Trump claims you need us. Ali proves they don't need them, at least not exclusively. Each proof weakens the original claim, triggers a louder, angrier claim. Louder claim drives more allies to accelerate alternatives, weakens the leverage further. The spiral ends with the alpha standing alone in a room, shouting at walls. Trump is shouting at walls. Carney's countermodel. Where Trump is loud, Carney is quiet. Where Trump threatens, Carney calculates. Where Trump demands loyalty, Carney offers contracts. Where Trump governs by tweet at 3 a.m., Carney reviews infrastructure investment at 7 a.m. The core insight of this entire moment in history: in the 21st century, power does not come from being feared. Power comes from being trusted. Nobody invests $9 billion in a country because they are afraid of it. They invest because they trust it. Because the rules today will be the same rules tomorrow. Because a phone call at 3 a.m. from a volatile leader won't change the regulatory framework they built their factory around. Carney is selling trust. The market is buying everything he has. He is deliberately turning Canada into the most boring, most predictable, most institutionally stable investment environment on the continent. In a world on fire, boring is worth billions. Trump calls it weakness. Markets call it a premium. Trump demands loyalty. Carney earns trust. Trump punishes defection. Carney rewards partnership. Trump treats allies as tenants on his property. Carney treats investors as co-owners of the future. Senior British conservatives who worked with Carney at the Bank of England said it best. Carney ran our central bank during the worst financial crisis since the Depression. We trust him. Can anyone say the same about the man currently occupying the White House? No, they cannot. And that answer just reshaped the global industrial order. You've heard the geopolitics. Now let's talk about your life, your car, your retirement account, your physical safety, your country's reputation, your car. The EV you're considering buying, or the gas car you're currently driving, just got more expensive, permanently. Here's the supply chain. EV batteries require lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite. The majority of North American supply of those materials runs through Canada. Trump imposed 25% tariffs on non-USMCA compliant Canadian goods. Canada retaliated. The trade war disrupted the flow of materials. Manufacturers faced uncertainty. Investment froze. Result: EV supply chain investment down 30% in 2025. Ford canceled the F-150 Lightning. Stellantis wrote down $22 billion as. The battery plant pipeline in America stalled. Meanwhile, Trump's March 2025 tariffs imposed 25% on imported car parts. Every car assembled in America, even American cars, uses parts from Canada and Mexico. Ford, GM, Stellantis, all of them. A vehicle that cost $40,000 before, add $5,000 to $8,000 in tariff-driven cost increases. I'll just buy American. Ford raised prices too. Why wouldn't they? You have no alternatives. You have no leverage. You just have a bigger payment. And the EV transition you were promised, the one that was supposed to bring prices down, is now running backward. Sales projected to fall 40% by 2030 from where they were headed, because the infrastructure investment dried up, because the critical minerals supply chain is now a geopolitical weapon, not a commodity market, your 401k. By Q3 2025, the U.S. EV supply chain investment sector was down 30% year over year. Ford's stock absorbed a $19.5 billion write-down. Stellantis posted its first loss since its formation. Global EV producers registered $65 billion in combined write-offs. If you have exposure to American automotive stocks, clean energy ETFs, or manufacturing sector funds, you felt this. You are still feeling it. Meanwhile, Canadian market indices rallied, Australian mining stocks rallied. The Canada-Australia Critical Minerals Supergroup is attracting investment capital at historic rates. Capital is flowing out of America and into the countries building the post-Trump supply chain architecture. Your retirement account is paying the price for a president who decided threatening allies was a trade strategy. Your national security. Five Eyes. The intelligence sharing arrangement between the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The backbone of Western security for 80 years. The reason the U.S. knows what adversaries are building, the reason Russian submarines are tracked, the reason terrorist plots are disrupted before they reach American soil. Trump threatened to review that arrangement because Canada declined to join a trade bloc on American terms. Think about what that means. If Five Eyes fractures, even partially, the United States loses GCHQ, the most sophisticated signals intelligence apparatus in Europe, loses MI6 networks across the Middle East and Africa built over 80 years of field operations, loses CSIS, Canadian intelligence with unique access to Arctic monitoring and North American threat vectors, loses infrastructure that took 3 generations of intelligence officers to build. You cannot replace 80 years of trust with a phone call. You cannot rebuild human intelligence networks with a Truth Social post. If Five Eyes fractures, Americans die, not metaphorically, not politically, literally, because intelligence gaps get people killed. Every intelligence professional in the world knows this. Trump threatened it anyway, because a prime minister said no. Your reputation. For 80 years, Made in America meant something beyond a label. It meant reliability, innovation, the future. When global manufacturers chose American plants, it was a vote of confidence in American institutions, in rule of law, in regulatory stability. That confidence is being destroyed, not by a competitor, not by an adversary, but by American policy choices. The EV sector, which was supposed to be America's next industrial generation, is contracting while Canada, Australia, and the EU are expanding theirs. Foreign investment in U.S. clean energy was down $35 billion in 2025. In global economics, reputation is everything. It takes decades to build. It takes one poorly considered tariff war to begin eroding it. Trump promised to make America great. He made America unpredictable, and the world made other plans. Right now, in Windsor, Ontario, there is a 455-acre industrial site on the banks of the Detroit River. Canadian workers are building what will become one of the largest EV battery manufacturing facilities in North America, a joint venture backed by billions in investment, drawing on Canadian cobalt, Canadian nickel, Canadian graphite processed into battery-grade materials right here in Canada. Excavators are moving. Concrete trucks are lining up. Thousands of workers are building the cars and the batteries that the American market will depend on, whether America likes it or not. Because physics doesn't care about tariffs. EVs still need lithium, they still need cobalt, they still need graphite, and the cleanest, most accessible, most geopolitically stable source of those minerals on Earth is north of the border. Meanwhile, across the river, the assembly line that was supposed to anchor Michigan's EV transition sites restructured, retooled, reimagined, not expanding, not leading the future, but scrambling to survive a supply chain crisis created entirely by the policies of its own government. Ford is building hybrids now. The all-electric F-150 Lightning canceled. The $19.5 billion investment, the marketing campaigns, the America is back in the EV race announcements, written down, written off. Because the minerals that were supposed to flow seamlessly from Canada into American factories are now a geopolitical asset that Canada is choosing to route through Australia, through China's refineries, through the EU supply chain, everywhere except in America that spent a year threatening to annex their country. Trump told the world he was putting America first. He put America's ego first, and the world made other plans. Carney stood at a press conference in Ottawa. A reporter asked, "Is this a permanent realignment? Is Canada genuinely pivoting away from the United States?" Carney didn't dodge. He looked into the camera. He said it quietly. The way a man who once ran the Bank of England says things, Canada will always be a friend to the United States, but friendship is not servitude, and we will build partnerships with everyone who shares our values and our terms. Our values and our terms, not American terms, Canadian terms, and right now the world is lining up to accept them. He didn't gloat, didn't attack Trump by name, didn't need to. The Windsor excavator said everything. This is what miscalculation looks like at a civilizational scale. Trump lit the fire because he thought the neighbor couldn't leave. The neighbor left. And every bucket of water Trump throws at the relationship turns out to be gasoline. How many factories have to restructure? How many batteries have to be built in Windsor instead of Michigan before this stops being a political debate and starts being treated like a national emergency? If you work in the American auto sector, if you're in Michigan, Ohio, Alabama, Tennessee, how does this feel? Is this the winning you were promised? Is this the future that was sold to you? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, every one. This channel tracks the industrial realignment in real time, every minerals deal, every factory decision, every dollar of investment that crosses the border going north instead of south.